Thank you. What made me decide to talk about decision making? Well, what actually triggered it is I stumbled upon an article from Forbes, a global media company. I don't know if any of you ever look into Forbes and have a look at what they have to say. I think possibly Mike has looked at Forbes because when we were studying for our degree in organizational leadership, Forbes often runs brilliant leadership articles, and it also keeps you up to date with the global trends. McKinsey is similar, but McKinsey is not the right name to be talking about in the current market. It has a bit of a name at the moment. Forbes, I just want to show you as an example, Forbes, this is their quote for the day. They always have these lovely quotes for the day. They're always wonderfully thought-provoking, and I love them. This is yesterday's. Anything worthwhile in life requires teamwork, and you cannot manage what you don't understand. Okay, which has got absolutely nothing to do with decision making. I just wanted to show you one of the benefits of having a look at Forbes. And they happen to be running an article on critical needs for leaders. Now, when I was the principal at the school, one of the things I loved to look into was what are the current skills required in the marketplace? Because if you want your children to leave school and to be able to really enter into the job market, they need to be equipped properly to cope out there. So I often used to have a look, and then I'd share it with the teachers. We'd make sure that with our curriculum, we are covering these areas somewhere in the curriculum. And there was an article there by Greg Sattel. I had never heard of him before, and I doubt if you have either. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a corporate executive, and an entrepreneur. And he's written for many of the A-list publications, including Harvard Business Review. And I see his main area of expertise is digital media. But he ran this article, it's called 4 Things Every Leader Should Know. And I think it was firstly the 4 things that caught my attention. Because if you ask Terry the question, what things do you think every leader should know? I think he would probably quite easily come up with a list of 20 without even giving it a great deal of thought. And this guy's consolidated it to 4. And I thought, well, that is interesting and it's worth having a look at. I'm not sure why it's half off the... Right, and here they are. The first one, developing talent is the most important thing you do. You have to make decisions others can't or won't. A certain percentage of your decisions will be wrong, and people follow a mission, not a plan. And you can see the 2 I've highlighted. They both are to do with decision making. And I thought, wow, that's quite a big deal. Decision making clearly is very important for leaders. Well, that's how I would interpret reading something like this. And then I also got hold of an article, Harvard article, Decision Making for Leaders. It was a university advanced leadership initiative think tank. And oh my word, this is not easy reading. But it was very interesting reading, and I've put it in Dropbox. If you would like to study it further and read more about decision making, and it takes leadership, it talks about very intricate areas of the brain and how the brain is involved in the decision making process, and it takes it right up to decision making at the level of presidents and people like that, from grassroots decision making right up. So it's quite an interesting article. And that is available for you now on Dropbox. But I want to kick off with a quotation from a Navy SEAL by the name of Brett Gleason. And the reason I've chosen his quotation is because it gives quite a concise summary of what we're going to be discussing today. Business leaders are faced with, before I do that, I have to read this. When you need to make a hard decision, flip a coin. Why? Because when that coin is in the air, you suddenly know what you're hoping for. And I thought, isn't that so true? You actually know what it is, and probably before it's landing, you hope it's going to land on the one you already know you want. I find that the most fascinating thing to read. Anyway, back to this. Business leaders are faced with dozens of decisions that need to be made every day. As our organizations grow, the decisions generally become more frequent, more complicated, and have more serious ramifications. Sometimes it's not about making the right decision, but just making a decision at all. The most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders in the world will tell you they have made many wrong decisions throughout the lifetime of their careers. But those failures always lead to valuable learning experiences. So above all, it's important to find ways to make tough decisions. Brent Gleeson, Navy SEAL. And if you think about, Kevin and I were talking just now about someone who is a Navy SEAL. They make tough decisions all the time. It's quite interesting. So I found his article extremely valuable for today as well. So we all make decisions daily. That's the reality. We do make them daily. Some of them are simple decisions, well, maybe not for all the ladies, but generally simple decisions like what to wear, what time must I get up, what time must I meet this person? What time must I do that? These are simple, daily, everyday decisions that we make, probably even subconsciously quite often. What must I eat? Okay, those are your general, everyday decisions, not the kind of decisions you need to pray about, think too hard about. They're uncomplicated, common sense, everyday decisions. But not all decisions are simple, common sense, easy decisions with little impact if you don't make them. There are many decisions that we also make that have serious impact, serious consequences, or could potentially have serious consequences. Should I buy a house? Should I rent a house? Should I buy a car? Well, it's going to take a lot of thinking and planning, looking at your budget, long-term planning, all that sort of thing that's involved. Should I marry that person? You're not going to flip a coin, I hope, to make this decision. Okay. Should I fire that person? Should I reposition them? These are big decisions that we also have to make as well. Should we move to another country? Should we change churches? What strategy is going to take my organization forward? Should I share the bad news that I've discovered with the chairman of the board or the stakeholders in my organization? Big impact decisions. And some people will tell you that they find it hard to make decisions. And there's a lot of factors involved in that, and we're going to go through them. Some people you'll find, because they're hesitant in making decisions, they look for people to back up what they think or believe, to support their own viewpoint. Some people will go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Some will toss a coin. Some people will take a vote, so the decision is shared because they don't want to take responsibility for the decision that they're making. But the fact of the matter is that great leaders are great decision makers. So if you're going to be a great leader in your home or in the place where you work, decision making is an area that we're all going to have to grow in. If you envision a really great leader, I think you envision a leader that is decisive. You don't picture one that's indecisive, do you? I don't think so. And you picture them as being decisive and communicating and acting quickly on the things that they decide. So how do they do it? How do they get it right? What is decision making? Or decision making, simply speaking, is the art of choosing between two or more courses of action. The right thing, the wrong thing, the best thing. Okay. It's also, on a broader sense, choosing between possible solutions to a problem. And decisions can be made through either an intuitive or reasoned process or a combination of the two. You often hear, when you're talking about decision making, things like making an informed decision Use your gut. Use your intuition. Use your common sense. Have you prayed about it? Those are things that we're likely to hear when we talk about decision making. And on that note, on have you prayed about it, what does the Bible have to say about decision making? I cannot not go into this area in a Christian group like this. We have to consider whatever the biblical viewpoint is on this particular issue. Firstly, decisions we make have to be God-honoring. I think that has to be a premise for any decision that we make. And if we're going to honor God with the decisions, sorry, let me just read you that from Proverbs. This is quite a scary scripture, actually. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. So you may think you've got the right decision, but when you pray about it, perhaps it isn't. We need to include God in our decision making. To be able to honor Him and make a God-honoring decision, you have to be familiar with His Word. How else would you know how to honor Him if you don't know what it is that actually honors Him? So that requires good familiarity with the Word. And Psalm 119, verse 105 says, "Your Word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path." Then we pray. Thessalonians is quite clear. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. The Bible definitely encourages us to pray about things. And then when you've prayed, the next thing you need to do is to actually trust Him. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. He will make straight your paths. And then lastly, seeking godly counsel. Without counsel, plans fail, but with many advisors, they succeed. From Proverbs 15:22. So for me, that's foundational for us in understanding that decision making has its roots for us as believers in God Himself. Seeking His face and understanding what His will is for us, His recommendation for us. Because if we go back to that first scary scripture, the plans that we have may be so off, although even with our common sense, they seem right. And what about prayer? You know, when you do these kind of talks, you think you don't want to over-spiritualize something when you're talking, because some things are just as they are, straightforward, common sense things. But in this issue, when it comes to decision making, I'm going to give you an example just now. We have to consider the God factor. Yes, God gave you a brain, and God expects you to use it. You don't have to pray about, should I eat my breakfast this morning? Your God-given brain tells you, yes, you should. So there's certain things that obviously we don't need to pray about. But generally, when it comes to prayer, I think when you're in situations, I think it's good to pray those quick, urgent prayers. Father, I don't know what to do here. Help. You know those quick ones when you're in a bit of a pickle and you've got to make a snap decision? So pray, and pray some more. And depending on how big and important your decision is, and you've got time, you may even want to fast about it. When you're looking to choose a husband or a wife or big decisions like that, this is something that needs prayer. This is a lifetime commitment. You need your Father's involvement in this. And I'm going to just share with you an example where prayer should have taken place and didn't take place. This is from Joshua 9:14. The men of Israel sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Did not inquire of the Lord meant they did not pray about it. Now we're talking about Joshua. We're not talking about just regular people like us. We're talking about a man who was leading the whole nation of Israel. He was in a situation where the Gibeonites, I don't know if you remember the story, they came, Joshua was following the instructions that were given to him via Moses, via God, to clear out all the people in the land. And if you recall, Joshua was told, be strong and courageous. It takes courage to follow through on God's instruction. So now he's in a situation where the Gibeonites come, they dress up, they act like they're destitute, that they've come from some faraway land, they've got stale bread. This is what why they would sample stale food, I don't know, but they did. And they checked their provisions, but they didn't inquire of the Lord. I suppose they didn't expect to be tricked and deceived by these people. They saw the food was stale, they took it on face value, they didn't pray about it, and they entered into a peace treaty with a nation that God had told they had to clear out of the land. And this created issues for Joshua, not just then, but you'll see a little bit later, in the long term, far-reaching generational issues for the nation of Israel. And currently what was going to happen now, he's signed this peace treaty, and when they are now being attacked, the Gibeonites being attacked, Joshua now has to defend them. And in addition to that, this nation with its foreign gods and strange beliefs, contrary to anything that God would have the Israelites be a party to, is now living in close proximity to them. And if you look at what happens with the nation of Israel, when you go through the book of Kings, king after king after king after king, and you see the idolatry and the things that went on through the nation of Israel, and then you look back and where it's all rooted and where it came in, it's quite something to observe. So if a man like this needs to pray about things like that, then I think it's quite clear to us we need to be praying. And the fact of the matter is God wants us to. He wants to be involved in our lives and the things that we are doing. So, however, we've now talked about prayer. I want to talk about intuition. Because where does intuition fit if we're a spiritual people, a God-fearing people? Is there a place for intuition? It's quite interesting slides here on intuition. You know the truth by the way it feels. Trust your instincts. Intuition doesn't lie. Dear you, sorry to tell you this, but it told you so. With love, your intuition. What is your response to that when you hear about these things about intuition? What do you feel? And I'm really asking you now. You know the truth by the way it feels. Do you agree with that? No? You know what I did when I saw these? I went, yes, but. I don't know if you also feel a little bit like that. There's a bit of, yes, I know intuition has a place, but. George, why don't you like the first one? The heart is deceitful. So we can't live by our feelings. Is there a place then for intuition? Yes. Cam?
I had an incident at work about a year ago. A new person joined the company and she was going to be the MD of the company, and up front I felt something uncomfortable about it. Now I don't listen to my feelings normally. I'm not that way wired. I either take my feelings to God or I put it aside until He speaks to me about it. But it made me feel very uncomfortable, and it kept making me more and more uncomfortable. And so I went and prayed about it. And the Lord told me why I was feeling uncomfortable, because of how she operates and what's operating in her. And the Lord told me what she was going to do in the company. So I prayed about it and I left it in God's hands. And I told Him, you either do something or I'm going to go speak to my boss about it. But it's very difficult in that situation, because how do I tell him what God has told me? This is not a believer. He's kind of in the process at the moment, asking if there's a God and that kind of stuff. So I understand my place there. I prayed about it 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks later. It was less than 3 weeks later. We had a big meeting in the boardroom. And she was called in and we were all sitting and going, what's going on? She's leaving the company. She'd been given a better opportunity in another company, and she was there for 3 weeks, and literally God removed her. And after she left, I saw the damage she was doing to her team. She was pitting people against each other, and some of the things the Lord said to me, I started seeing evidence of what she was going to do to the company. So even though I had a certain feeling, it was not my feelings, it was what the Holy Spirit was telling me inside. It was making me feel something. My skin was crawling around all the time. So there are times when we got to know if it's my feelings or it's something that the Lord is putting inside or bringing out inside of us or showing us that it's the discernment is required at that point.
Yes, I would agree with that. The rest of you agree with that. So then let's have a look at intuition. What about intuition? And I think that's what George was saying. We walk by faith, not by sight. Intuition is using your gut feeling for possible courses of action. Because you often do get that gut feeling that Cam is talking about, which we would call as Christians also a check in your spirit, which we have to learn to start listening to. And intuition is actually a combination of our past experiences mixed with our personal values. Now, as believers, our personal values are coming from the Word. And our experiences, hopefully, are things we learn from. So for us to not tap into that intuition would actually be foolish. But to live by it, I would agree with what George was saying. We can't live by that. We need to test these things. Like Cam did, you go pray about it. You feel the check, you pray. But our perceptions, and this is where intuition can unravel, our perceptions are our reality and might not reflect the truth. So check, is your feeling justified? Do what Cam did, go pray about it, check it out, but don't ignore it. Because that's why intuition wrote that letter. Sorry, I told you so. You didn't listen. Intuition is very useful when a quick decision must be made and the consequences are small. And then we have reasoning. Now, I think the reasoning element will probably appeal more to the guys than, as Cam was saying, he's not so much wired with intuition. Terry says intuition's a thing that women have mastered more than men. I'm not so sure about that, but maybe there's some truth to that. Reasoning, however, appeals often more to men because it's more that logical, factual thing that's going, whereas women are more touchy-feely possibly. Reasoning often combined with intuition, but it is different in that it's rooted in the facts of the matter. So you gather the facts when you're reasoning things out. And it's using the facts and the figures in front of you to make decisions. But reasoning can ignore emotional factors. And as we were discussing just now, we would be foolish not to listen. I wonder when Joshua was in that situation, if anyone there didn't have that gut feeling, I don't know if we should be doing this. Maybe even Joshua did. You know, we have to learn to listen to the feelings as well, and the emotional factors. There are other ways of looking at the emotional factors as well if you are making your decisions just based on facts. Let me give you an example, which would be horrible if you did this as a husband. Okay, the fact of the matter is your wife is 20 kilos overweight. That's a fact. She's complaining all the time, her clothes don't fit, and you know what women are like, it bugs them. And so your husband, now having looked at the facts of the matter, he comes home and he gives his wife a voucher to go to a health hydro for 3 weeks so she can lose her weight. Now, on the facts, that sounds like a good thing to do. But without consideration for her feelings and the emotional elements, that would not be a good thing to do. Because what you are saying, my dears, you're fat, you need to do something about it. Because that's how she's going to receive it. So to make decisions without any regard to the emotional factors would not be a good thing to do. And I'm just using a silly example. But in reality, we have to think about emotional factors. If you go rushing in, if you're in an organization, you've had a new appointment, and you go in and you go change everything in that organization, because you can see all the things that are wrong. And you might be right, they might be wrong. But you go in without any regard for the people who have a history there, who have felt that what they did was of value, and now you take it all away as if it's of no value. You're completely ignoring the emotional factors in your decision making. So we have to consider the emotional factors. The ideal way to work with this is to combine your reasoning with your intuition. So this is what they actually recommend that you do, that you start first with reasoning and you gather all the facts together. When you've gathered the facts, make a decision based on the facts. And this is not a decision that you're going to implement yet, okay? But your reaction to the facts, this is the decision I think I should make. When you've made what you think is the right decision based on the facts, now you turn to intuition and start to ask yourself questions that would force you to be now more intuitive. Ask yourself, how do I feel about the decision I've just made? Or how are other people in the organization likely to feel about the decision I've made? How will my wife feel? How will my children feel about this decision? So you ask those feeling questions. Then, once you've answered that as honestly as you can, then you can make adjustments if necessary. And then once you've made your final decision, you have to be committed and implement it. Okay, it's important that we also balance emotion and reasoning. Good leaders have learned the art of balancing the two. So we need to probably work on that and analyze and assess ourselves. Cam was very honest just now. He said, I'm not good at going into that feeling mode. And it's fantastic that he's actually aware of that. And probably there are others like that too. And maybe some of us are more emotional and we need to tap more into the factual to create that good balance that we actually need. So good leaders have got this balance, but they also need leaders need a healthy dose of what we call emotional intelligence. I'm not going to go into this in any depth because I did a whole talk on emotional intelligence some time back. So if you want to get that out and have a look at emotional intelligence, then you can do. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage your emotions and those of others. And as a leader, you need to be aware that you set the tone for the emotional climate, whether it's in your home or whether it's in your place of work. There's an interesting book called Primal Leadership. I don't know if any of you have ever had a look at it, where it talks about how a leader's emotions are contagious. And I think that's true. If you think of it just in the home context, that whatever your attitude is going to have an effect on the entire home. If daddy comes home and he's in a bad mood, he's had a bad day at the office, he kicks the dog and he shouts at the kids because the place is untidy, well, the whole emotional climate in the home has now changed. But if daddy comes in and he's happy, and he's going to infuse that happiness in the home environment. So your emotional mood tone is going to affect. This is what they call resonant leadership, just by the way. If you ever see that term, it seems to be the new in thing, resonant leadership. And they call it resonant leadership because it has this ripple effect. You know, when you put that stone in the water and it creates the ripples out, that's the resonant leadership. So from an emotional perspective, this is very important for leaders to be aware of, because you will set the tone wherever you are. So here are 4 major components of emotional intelligence. So I'm just going to go through them quickly because I said I don't want to get bogged down here, but just enough for us to understand and appreciate a little bit about it. Firstly, it's self-awareness. If you have good emotional intelligence, you have this self-awareness. You can accurately assess yourself. I think if you can accurately assess yourself, you can make the changes that you need to make. If you're not assessing yourself accurately, then you're not going to make the necessary changes in your life that you need. And I'm not talking about doing it separate from God. So please understand, we've already established the God factor has got to be central to everything we do all the time. So that God awareness in us. But we need to be honest with ourselves. And that is what you call emotional intelligence. Then there's self-management, and that's the ability to understand and control your emotions. I think sometimes people think that they need to rather suppress the emotions. It almost makes it seem like being emotional is a bad thing. Having emotions is a good thing. It's a God-given thing. Work with your emotions. Don't try to suppress them. The one danger when you have a major emotional response to something and you feel that huge sense of anger, when you're in that rage, literally you're unable to tap into the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is where you do your big picture thinking. So you need to bring yourself to a state of calm, because if you try to make decisions when you're in that mode, you literally, physically, from what's happening in your brain, are unable to do so. So you have to rein your emotions in. But what they actually say is, they have an interesting phrase. They say, ride it out. Don't chop it out. Ride it out. Work with your emotion, and then get to a place where you pull back to pulling in the facts, face your emotion, find out why you have that emotion. There may be something extremely valid to that emotion that you're feeling, which you shouldn't be ignoring. And then the social awareness. This is very much like self-awareness, but it's awareness of the emotions of others. And once you start to, that empathy thing with other people, that kind of thing, tap into that with the people that you work with, the people within your family environment. And then relationship management. I love this one. This is where it includes things like inspiring and motivating and things like that with relationships. This is the influence side, where you're influencing others. But apart from having a lack of emotional intelligence, there are other obstacles to effective decision making. Some of them will seem fairly obvious, I think. One of them being not enough information to make the decision that you need to make. You need to make informed decisions. Sometimes time is of the essence, and it does make it tricky for you to get the information you need. So when you're in that situation, what they recommend is that you prioritize the information that you need, because you can also overgather information. And prioritize what you need. I need this, and this information to make this decision, instead of allowing the gathering to go into areas where you actually don't need it. Then there's feelings of uncertainty. Oh, sorry, there's a quotation, feelings of uncertainty. We spoke about these feelings just now. Embrace, just as you would with your strong emotions, your uncertain feelings, you have to embrace them, ride out the uncertainty, and work with it. Check up why you have the uncertainty, because again, it may be valid. I've taken this quote from Albert Hubbard. I actually have no clue who he is, but it was an interesting quotation. The greatest mistake you can make in life is to be continually fearing that you will make one. Then you're not going to go any further forward. So deal with your uncertainty. A study was conducted with students. This was a very interesting, I was sharing it with Terry last night. One of the universities was doing experiments on the impact of uncertainty in our lives. And they had a group of students, they were writing an exam, and they said to them, they split it into two groups. They said to the one group, we have organized a package holiday, fantastic package just for the students to go to Hawaii and you will get your results before you leave. We'll make sure you have your results before you leave so you can enjoy your holiday. And then they offered them the package. The students, equally, whether they passed the exam or failed the exam, opted to go on the trip to Hawaii in equal proportions. With the second group, they did something entirely different. They said to them, unfortunately, your results will not be available before you go on holiday. So you now need to decide whether you wish to go on the holiday without your results, but we're offering you something special. You can, with the special offer that we've got, you can delay your trip by 2 days, which will give you time to get your results, but you have to pay a little bit extra. The majority of students opted to wait for the results and pay the extra in an effort to avoid the uncertainty. Although in actual fact it would have made no difference whatsoever. Obviously they had the money to going to go, so whether they passed or failed, it really doesn't make any difference. But we'll go, what they concluded with this and other studies, that we will go to great lengths to avoid that uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty that we don't like. Then another factor, another obstacle is too much information. And here Stanford University did an experiment with jam. Simple little experiment. They went to an upmarket supermarket and they put displays of jam, 24 on this table to display here. On the other side of the supermarket, 6 jams. What they noticed is that the table with 24 jams, more people went to have a look at it. And out of the people that tasted their jams, 3% bought. At the table where there were 6 jams, 30% of the people who tasted jams bought the jams. Because they were far more easily able to cope with less choice. When they were confronted with 24 choices, it was too much. And one of the things they've noticed is when people are confronted with choices like that, they get overwhelmed, and then they rather choose nothing. So one of the things with too much information is sometimes you actually don't know what to do with all of the information you've got. So limit the amount of information that you're looking for when you are doing decision making. Then another factor is too many people are involved in the decision making process. Although it says there's counsel in getting advice from others, when you get to the stage where you have too many people and you're deciding by committee, everyone's got an opinion, everyone's got a different view, and you can end up unable to know which decision to make at the end of the day. Then the other one is vested interests. If I mention the name Duduzani, might you know who has a vested interest in the decision making? To enable his own son to have options. Okay, that's vested interest. Okay, if you don't know, Duduzani is Jacob Zuma's son, okay? So that is allowing your own personal vested interest, whether it's for your child or for yourself, to get involved in the process. And they're not always very obvious when you're sitting around a table who has a vested interest. They might not express their vested interest. I think if you're in a situation where you suspect there's a vested interest and you're in a corporate environment, then my recommendation for you is that you would take that person outside of the meeting and say, we're going to be discussing this. I know your son, your daughter, your aunt, your uncle, somebody has a vested interest in the decision we're about to make. But because you're on the board here or you have a vote in this, I'm appealing to you to put aside your own personal feelings and look at what's in the interest of the company. or the group or whoever. They may even choose to opt out of the voting process. There are things like that, mechanisms like that, that you have to consider. When I was at the school, we had a school board, and there were parents on the board, and you could see that the parents were voting from their child's desk, so to speak. It happens, and you need to be aware of this. Then there's a thing that they call emotional attachment. Sometimes you've got people who are in the decision process who don't want to change anything. They like things just the way they are. And there are some people who just don't like to change at all anyway. So you have to be aware of these different factors. And then there's groupthink. You have to watch out for groupthink. Sometimes when people are in the position of employing, it's one of the things you've got to try and avoid when you're employing people for your organization. Because you can, if you're not careful, employ people that are just like you, who think like you. Because you're comfortable with the way you think, hopefully. So you employ people who are going to think like you. But what you actually need is fresh thinking, people with new ideas. And so groupthink can occur in other ways as well. If you've got someone who's a dominant voice in the group, they can push people into a groupthink situation where they're just going to agree with whatever is said. I've got a picture here. I'm going to just show you. Oh, what happened to my... Here. This is groupthink. They're sitting at the table. The chairman says, so do we agree? Yes, 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 agree, yes. Look at what they're thinking. No, we're doomed, no, bad idea. I don't know if the gentleman sitting at the end has been so forceful that they're actually scared to say what they really feel. And it has now created a whole groupthink environment. So you have to watch out. Those are obstacles as well. Then the last one is no emotional attachment. And you'd think, well, why would no emotional attachment in the decision-making be an issue? It can be very hard to make a decision where you don't care one way or the other. And it may matter to someone else. So you have to consider, again, the emotional factors. Okay, now I'm just going to go into, how am I doing on time? I'm going to pinch time, Terry, to finish, sorry. Okay, decision-making styles. Now, we all have styles. You may not be aware of them. As we go through this, possibly you'll pick it up, what your decision-making style is. There are different names if you do the research into decision-making styles, but essentially whatever they call them, they boil down to the same thing at the end of the day. And I've chosen these 4 names. The first one is command. I took this from the Navy SEALs article. It was a lovely article, and I'll use some of his examples. On an important decision, one rarely, this is just a quotation I thought I'd just put in here, one rarely has 100% of the information needed for a good decision, no matter how much one spends or how long one waits. And if one waits too long, he has a different problem and has to start all over. This is the terrible dilemma of the hesitant decision maker. Now, the command style is where you make a snap decision. You very seldom involve someone else in the decision making. You might, but you seldom do. You make the decision. You tend to use this mode when speed is of the essence. So command might sound negative, but there's a time when you have to use this style. And if you think of someone like a Navy SEAL, I can imagine they've had to use this on a number of occasions. Okay, this is when you need to be super efficient and quick with your decision. And what you need from the people that are surrounding you, if you're going to operate in command style, is you need honesty. You need clarity. You need the people who are giving you feedback to be giving you the right information so you can make that right decision really quickly. This, an example of when this was used, the Navy SEAL was saying, is when they sent the team in to capture Osama bin Laden. I don't know if you've heard the story before, but the helicopter pilot was coming into land, and he was about to drop them, the team, on the ground, and he lost lift with the chopper. He had to then make, and he made an instant decision. He made an order to crash land. But because he made the order to crash land, it was done in a very controlled way. Yes, the chopper was damaged, destroyed, unable to take off thereafter, but the team arrived safely and they managed to complete their operation. So he made that split-second decision using his intuition, his experience from the past. He had to tap into that and make this decision. And that would be a typical example of where command is used. I suspect, I don't know what you think, but I suspect that our president probably used the command mode quite frequently. Just my gut feel on his particular style. It seems that is the general mode. Not actually recommended for someone in a very senior position, but I'll come to that in a second. Then there's collaborative. This is exactly as it sounds. You get your team together, you get feedback from the team, but the final call is up to the leader. You could say the leader's making an informed decision based on the feedback he's getting from everybody, but he needs to bear in mind all the obstacles that we spoke about. You can end up with groupthink. You might have somebody who's got a loud voice out there, who dominates the rest of the group, whatever. You have to be aware of that when you go into collaboration. And you need, as a good leader, you need people who are confident enough to argue with you. You cannot be the kind of a leader who does command all the time and cannot tolerate when someone else has a different viewpoint. It's essential that you have a different viewpoint. There's a book called Lone Survivor by a guy called Mark Luttrell. And this is a very sad example, actually, of where collaboration was used. This is also out in Al-Qaeda territory. And these Navy SEALs encounter 2 goat herders. And they have to now make a decision. Now these goat herders have seen them. They are compromised. Do they kill the goat herders and bury them and hide them, or do they let them go? So the commander of this group got his group members together. They discussed it at length, all the pros and cons of the decision. They decided to let the goat herders go. Within an hour, they were completely surrounded by Taliban, and a fierce gunfight took place. They called in for assistance. They were all killed. The chopper that came in to rescue them was brought down, and they were all killed. However, the commander, the Navy SEAL commander, in the view of the Navy SEALs, made the right decision at the time. He held on to the Navy SEAL values, and yes, it didn't have a good outcome. But that is an example of collaboration which didn't go right. And the reality is, you may collaborate, you may make a decision, it might not go the way you expect it to go. But you're upholding your company values, and through tough things like this is when we grow as well. This is when we learn. This is when the team can also stick together and become stronger if you use it effectively. Whatever course you decide upon, there's always someone to tell you that you are wrong. There are always difficulties arising which tempt you to believe that your critics are right. To map out a course of action and follow it to an end requires courage. From Ralph Waldo Emerson. And then this is another style, consensus. This is your typical majority rules. It's democracy, effectively. Consensus is time consuming, because to get everyone's view and get to a place where you can actually come up with a vote takes time. It's the unlikely choice of style with serious impact decisions. You would not take a vote on who you're going to marry. You wouldn't. You might collaborate with some people, but you would not go by consensus. You might use the command style, my decision, I make it, finished. Very possibly you'll collaborate with people who are significant in your life, but you're not going to go with consensus. There is a time to use this. The benefit of this style is that members feel like they're being heard. Their viewpoint appears to matter. But leaders have to remember this is not an opportunity to abrogate your responsibility. You don't hand it over to the vote because you don't want to take this decision. You're taking a vote because you want a decision that this decision is going to affect everybody and you'd like to have general consensus in the decision-making process. And this one works best when you've got a number of viable options. Say in the family environment, you just within a small family unit, you're chatting with you, the wife, the husband, the kids, and you put out a number of family options, and the family can then vote on which of the options they want to choose. It's not going to be a life or death situation. All the options are viable. So consensus is very good in that kind of a situation. And then there's convenience. This is where you delegate the decision-making process to someone else. And this one also has merit because you can empower someone else. If we're talking about an organizational situation, it's an opportunity to empower someone else who's looking after another team. They are often more up to date with the facts in the area. It's their area of expertise. As the leader of your organization, you're not going to know everything. And you may wish to empower someone in a particular unit to make a decision. And by bringing in others to delegate, you bring in fresh thinking for problem solving. But again, you've got to watch for yourself as the leader. Are you trying to avoid accountability? Here is the rub with this one. It's hard to imagine a more stupid or dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. So the best approach, I think the best approach is the one that suits your situation, your circumstances at the time. But we need to be flexible, we need to be able to discern the situation and work within all four styles. What they do say is that in an unstable environment, your multi-focus style is probably the most likely approach. So when things and you don't know which decision to make and you're feeling uncertain, you may decide I want to collaborate here with these people, I want that information. I'm on this area here, I'm making that decision. In this here, I think this area needs to be done via consensus. Everyone's involved there, and you can work within the four. That's why they call it the multi-focus. So in an unstable environment, that tends to be the approach that works better, and just move within whichever style is going to help. In a stable environment, you know exactly then how things are likely to work, and you say instinctively consensus is the one to use, and you go with a single style. But the leader at the end of the day has to decide which style is best. And then finally, we have to, the one thing that puts leaders off making decision is consequences and accountability. Because whatever decision you make at the end of the day, you are accountable. Decision makers take responsibility. No one can be right 100% of the time. Something you just got to understand, you are going to get it wrong sometimes. And never be afraid of being accountable. The one thing that I think we do also need to be aware of is that decisions we make can have generational or eternal consequences even, both positive and negative. And that is the good thing about decision making. When you're making good, informed decisions, the benefits and the blessings that you can bring into other people's lives is huge. So decision making and doing it properly is such a good thing. However, there is the negative side of it, and we have to be aware of it. If I just go back to Joshua and the Gibeonites, remember I told you how they ended up having to protect the Gibeonites. Now they have to go to war for a people that they've made a peace treaty with. They've got all their idols and foreign gods and things now close to the nation, intermarriage and all those things happening, which is exactly why God told them to clear all these people out of the land. Now what happens is King Saul becomes king and he attacks the Gibeonites. He goes against the peace treaty that existed between Israel and the Gibeonites. And in the time when King David is king, the nation is now in drought. And when they inquire of the Lord, what is going on? Why can't we get out of the drought? That's when the Lord tells them, it's because of what you did to the Gibeonites. And David now has to make right. He goes to the Gibeonites and he asks them, what is it they require from him? And he has to then, to placate them, kill 7 of King Saul's sons. And they are hung up and put on display. And there's the most tragic story about the one mother who sits on the hillside there, looking at her children hung out there, killed, on display, and she couldn't bear the birds attacking. So all day she sat there flapping at these birds, chasing them away so they wouldn't peck at her children. It's the most horrible story, horrible ending. And it happened generations before with a bad decision from Joshua, who is actually a great leader. So these things happen, and we have to be aware of the dangers of bad decision making. A couple of things to finish off with from Oprah Winfrey. Do the one thing you think you cannot do. Fail at it. Try again. Do better the second time. The only people who never tumble are those who never mount the high wire. This is your moment. Own it. And from Napoleon Hill, when defeat comes, accept it as a signal that your plans are not sound. Rebuild those plans and set sail once more toward your coveted goal. If you give up before your goal has been reached, you are a quitter. A quitter never wins, and a winner never quits. I didn't know that. I've heard that saying often. I didn't know where it came from. And this is the final slide now. We're going into the decision-making process, a summary of everything we've done. Firstly, decide whether the decision needs to be taken quickly, whether you have all the information you need. If not, gather the information, set a time limit. You know how much time you've got to make this decision. Make the decision. Be aware then of your emotional response to that decision and others to the decision you're looking at. Highlight areas of uncertainty. Decide which of them have to have resolution. They don't all have to have resolution. Listen to your intuition. Don't overthink, and then go for it. Commit to it. Look for decision-making opportunities for yourself to grow. And if I can just add to that, look for decision-making opportunities for those of you who have children. Teach them now how to make decisions. One of the best ways with kids is to give them with guidance. There are 3 options here. Choose. Let them choose one. Why did you choose that one? Give your kids opportunity to grow in decision making. And when you get it right, celebrate your successes. And then you'll find the decision making process is not as daunting and can be a real blessing, either in your family or in your place of work. I'm going to just throw something out there for you about a decision that was made. Do you know of a major signing that took place in 1910? What was significant for South Africa? Do you know? Sorry? The State of the Union was signed in 1910. I just happened to, I know nothing about my South African history, I hate to confess, is atrocious. So I was having a look at the State of the Union that all the people signed in 1910. Do you know, at that time, representation was made for the Indian people and the black people of South Africa to be included in the State of the Union signing in 1910 to have equal opportunity. It was considered and taken out. Do you know, if that decision had been made, just think about it, in 1910, if there had been equal opportunities for people of all races in this country then, how different this country would have been. Isn't it just something to think about? And from that came apartheid. That decision resulted in apartheid that has damaged our country so severely. Decisions, even when, I mean, we've been talking biblical decisions, I'm giving you a real life South African decision. Look at the decisions and the impact that we see with Jacob Zuma and the capture that we're going through in South Africa at the moment. Decisions can have huge impact. And think about also, but the positive side, if our leaders, and that's what we need to pray for our nation, will start to make positive decisions that will turn around, pull out these weeds of the past, and turn it around and make this country what it could be, just through good decision making. Sorry, had we had more time to talk about it, we would have been able to go into that area.
These questions will go on Dropbox, and it depends how quickly Rebecca gets on this one, but as we've shown all of you, this stuff is going on YouTube.